And welcome to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 51. I am your host, Jared Morris. Thank you for joining me. So last night I watched Monday Night Football, as many of you probably did, and many of you probably did not. And Monday Night Football bled into SportsCenter, which I don't watch as much these days, but I did watch it last night, and I found it very interesting that there were two clear examples of primility back to back while I was watching SportsCenter. One of them pretty obvious, the other one not so obvious, but that's what makes it interesting. So I want to explain these two examples and then talk about how they are primility and kind of how they're linked together. So the first was Brandon Marshall, who was interviewed after the Jets-Colts game. The Jets won 17-7, pretty much demolished the Colts. And the Jets kind of have this interesting team this year where they have made some smart acquisitions, brought in some veterans, added them to a core of guys that they've had for a while, even though they've been up and down. And they've got this pretty good team. And Marshall, of course, is a guy who's been known. He's obviously a terrific player, has produced everywhere that he's been. But he's had some emotional problems, has dealt with them. I've even written a Primility newsletter about him, where he talked about how football is his platform, but helping people overcome mental issues is his purpose, which I thought was really interesting. So he's quite a character, not known as a wallflower, not known for being a quiet guy, certainly an outspoken, candid, very colorful guy. And so they brought him out and interviewed him after the game, and they were asking about the Jets and the team and who are the leaders in the locker room. And his answer about why the team has gotten off to a good start, I thought was very interesting, because he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we have no egos in our locker room. And he said, look at me, I'm the most Hollywood guy out here. And as if to accentuate his Hollywoodness, he's wearing these garish shoes, slipper things, and these white pants that I think Ray Lewis described as spray-on pants. It looked nice, I suppose, but his outfit was kind of ridiculous. Clearly very expensive and well put together, but ridiculous. And so he says, we have no egos in our locker room. I'm the most Hollywood guy out here, but I'm just feeling so humble. And they asked him to name the leaders on the team. And clearly he is an emotional leader. I mean, everybody knows that. It's Brandon Marshall. But as he's naming the leaders, he didn't list himself among that group. He named, guys like DeBrickashaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold and Calvin Pace and all of these guys that have been with the Jets for a while. And I thought it was a very clear case of a guy who doesn't need to be reminded of his own skill and talent. That was clear. There's even a moment, a few minutes later, where he talked a little bit of trash to the Colts cornerback, Vontae Davis. So Brandon Marshall is not a guy who struggles for pride. Right? He doesn't struggle for confidence. But what I thought was so great in this example was how clear he made the humility part of it. Basically what he was saying is, he's kind of a new guy in this locker room. They have all of these established veterans. Those guys are the leaders. They're the ones setting the pace, setting the tone. And I thought it was just a really interesting example of the dynamics of team leadership. Because when he said no one has the egos, well, clearly that's not true. Every single professional athlete has a huge ego. And for a lot of them, take them outside of the confines of a locker room, and that ego can run rampant. But on the best teams, those egos are sublimated for the greater good, which is what Marshall was explaining. And so you take a lot of guys who have big egos, don't struggle for confidence, but when they can actually feel the humility that Brandon Marshall was describing, now you've got that sweet spot, that primility, where the team can become greater than just the sum of the parts. So I thought that was a great example. Right after that, or soon thereafter, Steve Levy interviewed John Tortorella. John Tortorella was recently named coach of the United States team for the 2016 World Cup of hockey. And Tortorella is a guy who's kind of known as a hothead and has had some success, but had some kind of epic blowups, that kind of thing. And so, Levy kind of teased him a little bit about it, but they got into the new position and how Tortorella was feeling. And when Tortorella described how he felt being named to this position, this very prestigious position, he said that it made him feel humbled. And I believe we've talked about this on an episode of Primility Primer before. I've certainly written about it on primility.com and probably had a conversation with you if we've had more than 4 or 5 conversations about the misuse of the term humbled, especially in sports, because we hear it all the time. A person wins an award, they're named to a prestigious position, something great happens, and they say that they're humbled. Well, that's really incorrect use of the term humbled, because you can't there's no way for you to truly feel like you're in a lower position, as if your position has been lowered when you are given this prestigious position. And a lot of times what's happening here, I think, is someone like Tortorella is actually describing what Marshall said. I think Marshall was actually being accurate. There was no false humility there with what Brandon Marshall was saying. He was describing Primility, right? But he wasn't trying to say, kind of lessen himself in any way. And I think sometimes, and you got to cut guys some slack, obviously, when they've got cameras in their faces and they don't want to seem arrogant or egotistical. So they err on the side of being overly humble, at least with what they say. We have no idea what they really think. And so maybe that's what Tortorella was stricken by in this moment, was just being overly humble, because he's being overly cautious with what he's saying. And that's all well and good. But the point I'm making here is that he's not feeling humbled. What he's actually feeling is primility, because clearly he's not going to take this position if he's not proud of being named to that position. And you can tell he's proud of being named to that position, and he's confident in his abilities. And I think what he's describing is now he's going to be the coach for some of the best hockey players in the world. And it's obviously important for a coach to get the best out of his team, to have a sense of humility about the guys around him and about the talent of these players, and about being the coach, letting the spotlight shine on them and helping to put them in a position to play their best as a team. And that requires humility. The best coaches have that sense of humility, but also enough pride to stand up and lead. And so I think that's what he's describing. I think a lot of times when we hear people say that they're feeling humbled, this, that, or the other, in a strange place, what they're really describing is primility. And I think that was certainly clear with Tortorella. And I think that's definitely what Marshall was describing as well. And the big picture point here is, for any teams that we are on, teams that we are leading, or teams that we are a part of, having that combination of, that confidence in our ability to contribute, in our pride in our own contributions, but also pride in what the team can do, the role that we can play in it, and making sure that we are not overstepping our bounds for our own vanity, for our own success, for whatever that purpose would be. Making sure that we are committed to doing the best for the team. That's what's going to ultimately lead in the long run to the best individual success, and certainly in the short term and the long term to the best team success. And I thought that's what Tortorella was getting at without really saying it. Marshall, I thought, just came out and was much more elegant in how he described it, much more specific in how he described it. And in a lot of ways, that's why his team, the Jets, are 2-0, and that's why he's playing very well, and has assimilated very well into a room of veteran players, where a guy with a personality his strong or as strong as his may not always fit so well. But it sounds like he's got the exact right idea for how to fit into that situation, and there's a lesson in there for all of us. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this episode of Primility Primer. I always greatly appreciate it. We go live every weekday morning at 6:30 Central Time. Go to primility.com/live if you ever want to catch the live broadcast. And make sure you get on our email list, primility.com/join. Not only will you get your opportunity to get your free red Primility wristband like I wear, just follow the instructions, or email me, jared@primility.com, if it's not clear, but you'll also get our Friday digest so you can stay caught up with the shows. I know it's hard staying caught up with a weekly show. And you'll get our Monday morning email, primility.com/join. Thank you for being here. I'll be back tomorrow with another brand new episode of Primility Primer. Wrist bump.